Today we're on the road in Pinellas County, where the small community of Oldsmar sits on the northern shores of Old Tampa Bay on the comfortable waters of Safety Harbor. So we start our ride crossing the bridge towards Oldsmar. To our right are the waters of Safety Harbor, and farther right is the City of Safety Harbor, which was our first video. Hopefully I'm getting better at this as I go. Now, riding over this bridge was a bit daunting because it's heavily driven, so when the faster cars approached, I slid into the wide, empty bike lane until they passed by. Now, Oldsmar itself is an interesting little town with a neat history that archaeologists tell us started nearly 10,000 years ago from discoveries of permanent villages and small campsites. But the history we'll be riding through happened a lot more recently. Now, our story of this unique small Florida town begins with its name, which can be traced back to automobile innovator and manufacturer Ransom Eli Olds. Can you imagine having a first name Ransom? Yeah, it's kind of cool. Anyway, Olds built the first horseless carriage in America in the mid-1880s. A few decades later, he'd created and sold his first automotive business called Oldsmobile. Now, in 1916, during World War I, Ransom Olds purchased nearly 38,000 acres at the north end of Old Tampa Bay. He spent around $500,000. Now, unlike many of the seasonal resorts that sprung up in the area, Olds originally planned the property for working people, focusing on farming and commercial and residential use. And Oldsmar was ripe for development. The long bridges across the bay that exist now had not yet been built, so the shortest way to get from the Tampa side to the St. Petersburg side was through Oldsmar. Now, the city was first called R.E. Olds on the Bay? Yeah. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, does it? They later changed it to Oldsmar, but in 1927 the name was changed again to Tampa Shores, but then it reverted back to Oldsmar 10 years later. So, anyway, to attract Northerners into becoming residents, they initiated a large publicity campaign using slogans such as Oldsmar for health, wealth, and happiness. These tours chartered Pullman rail cars between Detroit and Oldsmar, and potential residents would stay in a 60-room hotel in Oldsmar called the Wayside Inn. Now, some little notes about the town. The first library in Oldsmar was started by a women's club in 1919. A mill produced Olds chairs, which were made from local yellow pine or cypress. And there was a casino with a 1,000-foot-long pier that was built into the bay. Now, unfortunately, in 1921, a hurricane flooded most of Oldsmar, devastating the area, but fortunately, there were no casualties. Well, here are some stats for you. Oldsmar has a total area of nearly 10 square miles, 90% of which is land. The population is 68% white, 18% Hispanic, 6% African American, and 3% Asian. As far as education, 93% of the residents have graduated high school, 6% are attending college as we speak, and 36% are college graduates. When it comes to age, 21% are under 18, 23% are between 18 and 34, 25% are between 35 and 54, 16% are between 55 and 64, and 15% are over 65. Now, the per capita income in Oldsmar is about $38,000, which is slightly less than the U.S. average of $41,000. The median household income in Oldsmar is about $74,000, which is just below the U.S. average of $75,000. But Oldsmar has grown over time to be a very attractive place to live because the median home value is $520,000, and the rent is about $2,200 per month. And about 14% of the residents live below poverty level. Now, as the automobile industry grew in the early part of the 20th century, Memorial Highway was built to connect Tampa, which is in Hillsborough County, to Pinellas County. And this road was to honor those who had lost their lives in World War I. That highway is still a major thoroughfare today. And that road brought a lot of much-needed traffic to Oldsmar. Unfortunately, competing bridges and roads soon took traffic away, and the city's growth slowed. Now, Olds expected this little town to grow to as many as 100,000 residents. But by 1923, only 200 people had settled there. So Ransom Olds began to sell off his properties. In the end, he lost nearly $3 million. So in Oldsmar, this is the closest you get to a main street. It's called State Street. And these sort of streets are usually the center of town, the center of activity, but not here. One of the challenges they have is on the right-hand side, probably 50 yards away, is a major road called Tampa Road. So there's not a lot of area there to develop on the right-hand side. And on the left-hand side, there's just a few buildings. All that land on the right, they've tried multiple times to develop something, but at the end of the day, there doesn't appear to be enough land to both have buildings and parking. And if you look a little bit farther to the right there, you can see the major road. So it's this really odd thing when you're driving down that major road and you look to the right and go, well, that's quote unquote downtown Oldsmar, but there's nothing really there. On the right-hand side here, we have City Hall and other government buildings. And on the left-hand side is probably the only really interesting building that still remains from Oldsmar's early days. Let's turn around and take another look real quick. The white part of that building used to be the bank, and it is now the Historical Society. So I love this building on that street, but that's about it. And then we're back into neighborhoods. So the strange thing about Oldsmar is that it's like a city that never became the city it intended to be. The land just kind of remained static as the other areas around it grew up. And as population filled those areas, they eventually started to fill the little town of Oldsmar. So in the end, Ransom Olds' dream actually became a suburbia that happened to also be a city. Oldsmar does have industrial park areas, office park areas, retail, but the bulk of it is really just neighborhoods next to neighborhoods, combined with some really great, beautiful parks on the water, and Oldsmar is near everything in the Tampa Bay area. It's just a really unique little town. I've ridden through a lot of little, small Florida towns on my Navi, and this is one that is just like, oh, well, it has like a city hall, but most of it's just cool little neighborhoods. One of the really cool things about Oldsmar are the parks. because it has a shoreline on the waters of Safety Harbor, that shoreline is either parks or really nice homes, basically. So you have some nature parks like the one we're starting in here. You also have a veterans park for those soldiers who have served. And then there's this really big park called, surprisingly, R.E. Olds Park, which is where most of the city's big events are held, like this fair that was packed when I didn't even know what was happening. I just rode up and there it was. It was cool. It had rides, it had an amphitheater with bands playing, it had a whole bunch of classic cars people could look at. It was really neat. Now here in one of the neighborhoods, you can just kind of see, if you want to know what it's like to drive through the average Central Florida neighborhood, this one in Oldsmar fits that perfectly. These are a lot of homes built anywhere between the 70s and the 90s. And they're just one after the other after the other. And this is the bulk of Oldsmar. Now, when you get to the homes that are on the water, this is where you really see a large variation of homes in age, in style, and in size. Living on the water is always the most preferable, so you've had people in the 70s and the 60s build homes on the water, and over time, those homes are eventually replaced. So you can see on one drive here, homes that are built in the 70s and then the 80s. This one here, like the 90s, and well, this one here's like probably 2000s, and well, this one's probably newer, like 2010s. And as you ride through, it's just kind of this mishmash. But it's a great example of the type of architecture in the homes that were popular at every decade, and almost all of them are on the shorelines of Oldsmar. So as we leave Oldsmar and head back over the bridge, I'm left a little confused about what to think about Oldsmar. As a rider, anytime you can ride near the water and the coast and you can see the shore and feel the breeze with the sun in your face, it's a good ride. But that attraction of a really cool main street, of a really long, complicated history, is just kind of missing in Oldsmar. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's different. And I don't know. I don't know what to think of Oldsmar. I do think this, though. I think it's probably underrated. And this is what I mean. I think if you wanted to stay and enjoy the scenery and the surroundings and the attractions in the Tampa Bay area, I would guess that staying in Oldsmar would probably be cheaper, like at an Airbnb or something, than staying other places that are just as close to everything else you want to see. I mean, I don't know that for sure. You'd have to check it out yourself. But because it seems to lack that core tourist attraction, for those visiting the area and needing a place to stay, that just may be to your benefit. Anyway, I don't know. Check it out. Let me know in the comments. All right, everyone, be safe out there on the roads, and I'll see you guys next time.